Ready for this?
I'm ready.
All right. Yeah, I'm Reverend Cade Curry, pastor here at First Presbyterian Church Springdale. And on this Monday of Holy Week, I feel privileged to have this opportunity to share with you this particular Station of the Cross. The station that we talk about today is a great story in the New Testament. In fact, all three gospel writers thought that this particular event was important to include in the story of how Jesus ended his life through the cross. It's a station of Simon of Cyrene and how he meets Jesus and is asked. Scripture even uses the word compelled. He's compelled to carry the cross of Christ up to the place of crucifixion. What's interesting little fact, that the Gnostic view of Simon of Cyrene is that he actually was mistaken for Christ, and he gets crucified in Jesus' place. And thus their way of, from a Gnostic view, of proving that although Christ was alive later, this is sort of the way they say that happened. Simon of Cyrene is sort of a scapegoat for the one that gets crucified. And of course, as Christians, we say, no, Simon had a much different role here. And in fact, Jesus was crucified, dead and buried and resurrected. I'm going to go ahead and read the passage that's associated with this Station of the Cross. It comes from Luke. Hear the words. As they led him away, they seized a man, Simon of Cyrene, who was coming from the country, and they laid the cross on him and made him carry it behind Jesus. So I think it's interesting that the scripture tells us where Simon comes from. Cyrene was east of Jerusalem. It would have been a place where we know that politically over 100,000 Jews are forced to leave home and live in that region about this time, that it was sort of a hotbed for early Christ-following views and beliefs, and those who really believed Jesus was who he said he was. And so we know that I think Simon probably had heard of Jesus and knew of the stories, but a lot of scholars, and not everybody, but a lot of scholars believe that the New Testament hints that Simon was picked out of the crowd because he was probably dressed as someone who would not have been a follower of Christ. He was probably not a Jew, and although heard of Jesus, didn't yet have a true belief in him by chance. I still picture that. I still think it's so interesting that Simon is there with his two boys, and he's compelled. And when the scripture uses that word, it's not that Simon was so much compelled. It was more that the Roman centurions compelled him to carry the cross. They made him to do it. He didn't have a choice. I think that's what I learned when I think about this story in the larger scale of the Passion narrative. It's interesting to me. This is the one place where we intervene as humans. I think Simon represents us all. Certainly you have Roman centurions, and we all have our small crucifixions of Christ as we sin. So you could go there. We're certainly not Jesus, so we can't find ourselves so much in the story there. But I think Simon is, for me, where we, as a common believer, we finally find our place in the Passion story. And so here's my thought on what we learn from Simon. I believe Simon was unwilling at first to join into this parade of the crucifixion. He didn't want to get involved. I then picture Simon. There's movies that show this scene, and I just in my mind have a picture of Simon of Cyrene gaining with every step more and more compassion for Christ, more and more belief with every little step as he carries that cross, that this man must be doing this for some good reason. He's watching what's happening. He knows in his heart of hearts, he knows the stories that Jesus has sort of surrendered himself to this process. Although maybe not a believer yet, I think Simon, just this short walk, I think that his faith is molded in this short little journey. as he carries this cross, unwilling at first, and then by the end of this parade, as they get ready to crucify Jesus, I think Simon of all people, maybe second to Mary, his mother, I think Simon has this compassion for Jesus, because he knows now what it's like to have to go through this process of crucifixion. So I think that's what I learned from Simon. How often it is that I'm unwilling to really join in this Lenten journey, to join into this traditional idea of like preparing myself for Easter Sunday. I really just would rather not get involved with it. I'd rather just show up on Easter and declare resurrection and all things be good. But I think that's where I learned that Simon teaches us a lesson, that we really don't understand this passion narrative until we gain this deep compassion for Christ and what he's been through. And so putting ourselves in the place of Simon of Cyrene, who literally, with every step of that journey, gains compassion for what Christ is doing in this moment. I think that's huge.
It's interesting that Simon is a parent, right? And you are a parent as well. How would the presence of your children, how would that influence your decision?
Yeah, so twofold for me as a parent. That's a great question. One is the need to want to protect my kids. I want to know where they are. And if I'm carrying this cross in this crowd, where are they now? Who has them? Who's watching over them, right? But I think what may override that is Simon realizes at some point, and I would hope I would too, it's a huge opportunity to set an example for these boys and to say, I didn't do this act, but just because I didn't do it doesn't mean I can't show compassion for this man who's about to lose his life. And can you imagine the conversations that Simon has later with his boys to say, let me tell you what that was like, and let's see what life lesson we learn together on how to treat people and how to help carry people to the end. Or I don't know what that conversation would have been. That's definitely worth the process of thinking. One of his boys' name was Rufus, and later in the Gospels, I believe it's in one of Paul's letters, Paul kind of has this epiphany. I don't remember what it exactly is. Paul has this epiphany, and he gives some great detail into a piece of Jesus' life. And we find out in the scripture that his source was a man named Rufus. And many scholars believe that the son of Simon of Cyrene, Rufus, is the same Rufus that's later given credit by Paul to some vital information that makes up one of Paul's kind of ideas of faith. And that Rufus, after that day, becomes, as he grows up, becomes a very strong force in the Christian following movement in that day. So I think it had an impact on everybody that would have been there that day. And I think I would close with this. It's difficult because we think of Jesus Christ, we think of his godliness, his deity self, sort of the part of him that's fully God. We think of that, we think Jesus doesn't need our help, doesn't need our compassion, doesn't need us. But then there's this human side to Jesus, and I think even now, there's still this idea that Jesus needs us to do our part. And so where does that motivation come from? I think it's compassion. I think it's the compassion that Simon felt as he watches Jesus. And our acts of service then should come out of a place of compassion for what Christ did for us. But it's more than just what Christ did for us. It's literally putting ourselves, holding that cross, carrying it to that place where we don't have to pay the price. We get to hand the cross over, take a step back, and Jesus is sent up there in our place. That's where our motivation comes, to serve and to be the hands and feet of Christ, because he does need us, and our compassion is important.
I think that's great.
That's awesome. I love it. Good job.